I come from a generation of people that have given 200 years of free labor to this country, unparalleled in terms of the contribution. In the military, we're over 200,000 African Americans. Over 10% of those that fought in the Civil War was African Americans that fought to save this country for all that foolishness of people trying to manipulate others and take advantage of them. And where I'm at today, I want to build the beloved community that King talks about. A community where you care for everybody, absent of poverty, absent of hunger, and absent of hate. That's the community that I am fighting for, and that's the one that I want to see.
Hello, East Anchorage. This is Alaska State House Representative Andrew Gray, and East Anchorage Matters. The goal of this broadcast is to keep the constituents of Anchorage's Campbell Park, University area, Russian Jack, and Unaka Valley neighborhoods aware of the relevant happenings in the halls of government of our great state. Today, we have two interviews with Alaskans of interest and importance. The first is with community activist Ed Wesley. The second is with President and CEO of Shiloh Community Housing, Shenee Williams. Ed Wesley was born in Bolivar County, Mississippi on January 9, 1951. He moved to Fort Greely, Alaska in 1973 after being drafted into the Army. His wife joined him shortly thereafter, and the two raised all 5 of their children here in Alaska. Ed and his wife have never lived outside the state since. He was elected president of the Anchorage NAACP in 1981 and led the charge to change the way the Anchorage Police Department used deadly force. During a long career of public service, he has held many positions throughout our city. He has served as treasurer of the Anchorage Council of PTAs, vice president of the Anchorage Board of Realtors, president of the Alaska Black Leadership Conference, president of the African American Business Council, president of the African American Historical Society, and past commander of the American Legion Post 34, where he sponsored activities for veterans and raised funds for disabled veterans to attend the National Wheelchair Games. He also served as deacon of the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church and is here in the Capitol with Shiloh Community Housing, advocating for funds for their new community resource center.
Ed Wesley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to talk about you, but I just want to start by what you're wearing. I noticed you've got a jacket on today that says Buffalo Soldiers. What are the Buffalo Soldiers?
Buffalo Soldiers is a unit that was put together after the Civil War, mainly Black soldiers, and they operated west of the Mississippi. They were the soldiers that secured the mail and made sure that the settlers were protected as they expanded into the West. Buffalo Soldiers also were the first park rangers. When you go to these large national parks, the Buffalo Soldiers were the first park rangers. But most notably, in 1898, the Buffalo Soldiers helped win the Spanish-American War. There was 5 medals of honor that came out of the Spanish-American War. It demoted the colonial power of Spain. And what did America get out of it? Guam, Puerto Rico, and also the Philippines for $20 million. So it made America a greater power as a result of the work of the Buffalo Soldiers. At the time, right after the war, or it was actually during the war, there was a gentleman here in Alaska by the name of Soapy Smith. Raised in hell, they sent him up to Alaska in 1899. They stayed here from 1899 to 1903, keeping the peace down in Skagway, Alaska. So I wear that in honor of those Buffalo Soldiers because they made a major contribution to America.
Thank you so much. I did not know any of that history at all. I appreciate that. Where were you born?
I was born in the Delta of Mississippi. The Mississippi Delta, that's a place where you had people like B.B. King and Muddy Waters, the blues, the gospel. They came out of that areas. And My folks from a little town called Mount Bayou, Mississippi. It was an all-black town. And if you Googled that, they had a great history. That is the place that was the haven for people like Fannie Lou Haven, her husband, Megger. They lived in Mount Bayou. So they were able to operate and go into the all-black town. Otherwise, the thing that they were pushing, they would not have been able to do that. And of course, he had moved to Jackson, Mississippi, where he was assassinated.
And did you grow up in an all-black town?
No, I was on the outside of it. My father was there and
gotcha.
active there. I grew up as a sharecropper, tenant farmer, my folks were. And they had to get out of Mississippi. And I left there in 1965.
So you were about 14 years old?
Yes, and went to Chicago. And while in Chicago, I had a great experience. It was a great place to move to with all of the things that was going on. I became an activist because of the war at the particular time. I don't know if you ever heard of the Chicago 7, when the Democratic Convention occurred and they were beat.
68?
1968. I was out there in Grant Park as a 17-year-old protesting the war because one of the students in my high school, Ralph, when he graduated from high school, 6 months later, he was dead in Vietnam. So we didn't want to go to war without having the right to vote on whether or not we could be in a war. So I was out there protesting to lower the voting age. Took a few years, 1972. We got the right.
21 at the time? And
Yes, 21. And then we got the right to vote right at 18 of age, but until 72, yeah.
And you did get drafted, correct?
I did get drafted. I was the last of the draft. Nixon ended the draft after I got drafted, and it brought me to Alaska.
So you got drafted into the Army and you were stationed at Fort Greely?
Yes, I was. I was stationed at Fort Greely and a little town of Delta Junction. I bought a house in 33 acres of land there in 1975 and didn't even sell it until 1990. The reason I sold it, I didn't want to have the land in a desolate place and for my kids, so I got rid of it. And 3 years later, they opened up the missile site there because Senator Stephen had said that they were closing all the bases.
Oh, so you were thinking that land would be worthless, nothing was going to happen there. It was
Right.
Wow,
Right.
That's a bummer.
But the benefit of it was that when I was working on the pipeline, doing the security there, I could go home at night. I worked there for like a year or so, and before I was moved to other parts of the.
So let's get to that. So you were a military police officer,
Yes.
and so then you were able to just translate that into working on security on the,
Yes.
the construction of
Yes.
the Alaska pipeline.
Yeah.
And I guess let's talk a little bit. What was your experience like? I assume it would be a huge change for somebody from Mississippi to move to Fort Greely. Maybe from Chicago, it's cold. Maybe not quite as big of an adjustment, but I still think it was an adjustment.
Yes, it was an adjustment. Probably more for my wife than it was.
When did y'all get married?
In 72.
Okay, so you got married and then you got drafted and then you got...
No.
Oh, God, you got drafted and got married.
I got drafted and I entered the military in August of 1972. Got married in December of 72. Came to Alaska in February of 73.
Gotcha. That's the timeline.
Yeah, so I've been in Alaska over 50 years.
Wow. Yeah, and your wife obviously is with you in Alaska.
Yes.
So
we have 5 beautiful children. People ask me, what do you think your biggest accomplishment in life is? And I said, my children. I have 5 children. They're all in good health. They're all productive citizens in society. I have a daughter that's on the school board down in Jackson, Mississippi. I have another daughter in Texas. She's the assistant superintendent of schools down there. I have a son. He's a businessman in Arizona. I have another daughter. She's the director of TRIO program out at UAA. I have another daughter that's does administrative through a medical office. But they're all their children's honor students, and I think that we raised them right.
The last daughter you mentioned, is she in Alaska as well? Do you have two daughters in Alaska? Or just...
Yes, two.
Okay. But then the other three in the lower 48.
The other two daughters, my son.
Roger that.
Yeah. Yes.
And did you know you were going to be in Alaska forever? Did you ever consider moving back to the lower 48?
In 1968, I was at home and I was watching an ad on television, and they were talking about the discovery of oil in Alaska and how promising that would be. In 1972, when they were giving us the assignments, many of us was on a call to go to Vietnam, and they got the orders changed, and they sent us to Alaska. And many of my friends, and they were like, oh, no, but I was looking forward to it because I knew of the opportunity. I did that 2 years. The last year, I was a soldier of the month, and they were trying to get me to have a career in the military, but I said no. I saw that opportunity and got out. Didn't want to stay in.
Did you know you had a job waiting for you on the pipeline?
You know what's interesting about that is that my first sergeant became the head of floor security. And I didn't know that I had a job, but I know I had a connection. And it worked out fine. I began to work for Wackenhut Security. And I was a supervisor there at Delta Camp.
When did you get to Anchorage?
In 77. I used to come to Anchorage all the time. We would attend the NCO Academy, but officially moving here was in 1977. I came into Anchorage and got active in the community. In 1978, I got involved with the Anchorage NAACP as a youth advisor. And I look back today, a lot of those young people that was in that group became very successful here in town. I think there's three of them, the officers became lawyers. One was a businessman that helped people raise money around town. Another one was a high executive for Toyota. And as I look back on them, they all became very successful. We won an award. We had 300 members in that youth council.
You did a good job.
And then that's why I ran for president after that.
And so what year did you become president of NAACP?
In 81.
81. And that's the year where you created the 13-point 2-page agreement with the Anchorage Police Department on the use of deadly force.
So what happened there was a gentleman by the name of Shiloh Williams that was shot through his window. He was standing up at a window.
In Anchorage?
In Anchorage, yes, and over in the Mountain View. And the police shot him. I guess from the reports were that early in the day, there had been some people had reported shots being fired. And so when they showed up, he was standing up in that window, and they had made an attempt to try to get him to come out, but he did. But they shot him through the window. And as a result of that, I made the call into the Justice Department because to shoot a person like that's not causing immediate danger, I didn't think that was right. And so we were able to get the deadly force policy changed from fleeing felon to a life immediate danger. What a fleeing felon means is that if you stole something, it was worth $500, they could shoot you in the back, and that was considered justifiable homicide. And so that didn't make sense. And the Supreme Court, I think it's either 84 or 85, agreed with my thinking because they changed that fleeing felon rules for the entire country.
Wow. You had your finger on the pulse of what everyone was looking at.
Right.
You worked for presidential candidate Jesse Jackson in his presidential bid? 1988.
Yeah. What happened there is Alaska is a Cox state, and we were able to get enough delegates for him. Out of the 11 states that he won, Alaska was one of them.
I did not know that.
That's okay.
That is so interesting. So
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson won the Democratic caucus in Alaska in
Yes,
1988?
yes.
Wow.
Because of the work that we put in to make that happen. And that took place up in Fairbanks, Alaska. And then I went on to Atlanta, Georgia to that national convention, and I was his whip on the floor. And it was quite interesting because the group that wins the caucus is in charge of the passes to the floor. And I had some prominent people that was approaching me to get passes to get it on the floor for the people down in Atlanta. It was good to put that work in and make those changes.
And the eventual candidate for 88 was Dukakis?
Yes.
Gotcha. And then I wanted to ask you about 1992, the banking examiners. Can you explain what was happening then and what the banking issue was at the time?
In 1978, there was a congressman by the name of Perrin Mitchell, and he introduced legislation in Congress that basically said that it was like the Community Reinvestment Act. If a banking institution took money out of an area, they had a responsibility to invest back in that area. And back at the time, places like Mountain View didn't have anything, no banking areas. I don't even think there was one in the Fairview area. We called upon the bankers examiners out of San Francisco and encouraged the institutions here to bring about change. And they did. I got support from the banks to bring about that change. And one year we put 23 young blacks as interns in the bank. 3 of them became managers. Several of them was up in Fairbanks, but most of them was here in Anchorage, and some of them are still in that banking.
I assume that this had to do with redlining, like why there was no banking in certain parts of town, why we didn't have any.
Not only that, when you would enter the banks, you didn't see any clerks or managers, anything. So that brought about that change, and the banks opened up so that there was access to financing.
Thank you for that. You ran for Senate in 2016. 2016? What was that experience like?
It was a great experience. I probably wasn't really thinking about running for the Senate, but what was happening is that individuals passing the seats off without the community having an input. It's like wait until the deadline, don't let anybody else know, and then you let your staffer go ahead and file for the seat. And I didn't like that process. I ran a couple of times. It's just mostly a protest. I had really no interest in
Holding the seat, it was more to make point.
If I had made it, I was going to, when I put my heart into something, I wanted to make it happen. But initially, I was not even thinking in those directions.
And you did your 2 years in the Army. I know that that veterans issues are close to your heart. Mm-hmm. Is there anything in particular that you want to talk about in terms of veterans issues that you want folks to know more about?
I served 4 or 5 years VA as a volunteer. And while I was doing that, I set up a train ride for veterans. I raised money for the disabled veterans to attend the wheelchair games. And I was proud of that, to raise that money for that. And I just think that the state needs to be conscious at all times that per capita, we have a lot of veterans among us, and we should be looking at how we can protect those who have protected us and make sure that they are not just used as pawns for us to make money.
Kind of leaping off that, what are your thoughts about the state of politics, not only in Alaska, but in our country today?
I think that out of the 7.8 billion people in the world, each and every one has their own individual DNA. meaning that God made all of us special with special gifts, and he made us in his image. And if God made us in his image, we should hate no one. We can hate what they do, but never hate an individual, because what are you going to do when they change? Because people do change from what they do. And this country was set up by wealthy people with a caste system to take advantage of the poor and keep them ignorant. And until all Americans get the unfettered access to voting, we will continue this caste system, which the caste system is basically a socioeconomic system that divides people. And that was set up here in this country in 1681 with white and black. Mm-hmm. And I say to most individuals, they don't even know they're being used. Because when someone say white, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't identify with your culture. It doesn't identify with where you're from. That was set up by the British. The British has a caste system in England today. You're born into royalty, you stay in royalty. There's a caste system over in India that they set up, 5 class system. And they set the class system up here where white was supposed to be on the top. And that all started because the Bacon Rebellion in 1675, when they threw the governor out. And then they came back in 1681 and established this caste system. And the caste system just takes care of itself, people, keeping them divided at each other and the poor, and they're not advancing. Think about what happened in 1980 until about 2020, 40 years. The rich got richer, and they used the tax code to have so much money. Their only problem is how do they give it away before they die. Whereas the regular people who helped them make all that money, they don't care about them. And before, in the 1950s and 60s, the tax code was 90%. But the greed, people you hear today constantly trying to get the tax code even lowered. And then we have a man that's running for president, again, manipulating the system. I think about my great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War. And here's a guy who ran for president. His parents didn't even get here until 1885. His mother was not even born here. She was an immigrant. His wife was an immigrant. He deflects everybody from his own immigration past, having us focus and fight on each other so that we don't think about that. His wife was immigrant. His mother was immigrant. His mother wasn't even born in this country. And if you've never served in the military or haven't provided any service, you don't pay any taxes, what gives you the right to think that you have more rights in America than anybody else? You may fool some people, but you can't fool the soldiers and the people who have fought for this country. And I come from a generation of people that have given 200 years of free labor to this country, unparalleled in terms of the contribution. In the military, we're over 200,000 African Americans. Over 10% of those that fought in the Civil War was African Americans that fought to save this country for all that foolishness of people trying to manipulate others and take advantage of them. And where I'm at today, I want to build the beloved community that King talks about. A community where you care for everybody, absent of poverty, absent of hunger, and absent of hate. That's the community that I am fighting for, and that's the one that I want to see.
Ed Wesley, thank you so much.
We have to learn to nurture that which God put on this earth. We nurture by complimenting people's character, not materialistic things that they acquire. trying to compliment someone for having new cars and materialistic things. It's better to compliment someone who did something for others, because the best thing that you can do in life is serve another person.
I'm reading about Jerry Falwell. What's interesting is that Jerry Falwell and the moral majority, one of their big tenets was that the free market is godly, that capitalism is godly, and that anything that looks like socialism is evil. And I feel like it was laying the groundwork for Trump, this sort of peculiar thing of him having support of like really religious white people. But I think that root started back with this whole strange thing that free market capitalism is somehow Christian. I don't know if you have any comment on that, but I just feel like when you're talking, I'm hearing like, yes, this is the truth, but we've got this alternative truth over here that somehow...
There's no such thing as an alternative truth. The truth is the truth. There's no alternative truth. Alternative is a lie. The truth is what sets you free. And two of our greatest leaders of the 21st century have given us the answer. Then Nelson Mandela taught us that the greatest weapon that we can use to change the world is education. We have to educate people to what the truth is, not try to get arms and fight and take things like that. We have to educate people. We have to put all of our energy in educating people to what the truth is. And as we do that, view them as God's creation. Even as I look at Jerry Falwell or even Trump, I want to try and find whatever's good in him and not try to accentuate that what is bad in him.
Mm-hmm. The first person is Nelson Mandela. Who's the second?
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King.
In 1957, at the Lincoln Memorial, he said, give us the vote, give us the ballot, and we would put men into the legislature that would change our society. But we haven't had that. We've had the rich people constantly manipulating the poor. They won't even allow them to get Medicare for themselves. They keep them hungry and they feed them with misinformation. And they should, one day they're going to wake up. I think some of their children
are waking up.
That's why you hear them say, oh, this woke, God,
yeah.
This woke. And I am working on an initiative right now called Community Read. And there's a young lady, she's 80 years old, out of California. We're bringing up here on the 23rd and 24th, can teach individuals how to read in 40 hours. Reading will give wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, to manifestation, to visualization of your destination. And we want to transform this community by allowing people and working with them to read so that you're informed and know how to read. And what brought that about was we were going to offer financial literacy in this community resource center. Then we realized there's a lot of people can't even read. It's offering financial literacy and talking about asset building, they can't even read. No.
You just need to offer literacy. Your list of organizations that you've been affiliated with over the years is long.
Like the one I'm with now. So.
Yes.
I'm down here with Shiloh Community Housing.
Yes. Do you want to talk about Shiloh Community Housing?
Yes, I would. I'm so excited about Shiloh Community Housing because we believe that the direction that we're headed to disrupt homelessness and prevent homelessness is the way that we should be the community should get behind this because we could go out and purchase all these facilities, but who's going to maintain them? And is that going to be a burden on the taxpayers? If we can prevent this homelessness, it's going to benefit all of us. Here's what we're up against, and King said this a long time, that what affects you indirectly will affect you directly. You have people that lived on the hillside in different areas in Anchorage, Alaska, ignoring the other areas, lower income areas, not realizing it's like having been on a boat and you're up on top, but down in the bottom there's a hole in it. It's going to affect you, and it's affecting business people right now, the quality of life, the safety in the whole town. So if you'd have taken care of those areas, then that would not have happened. We have to be in the mode of looking at things the way we want it to be and focusing on it the way we want it to be and not being so selfish about what we get for ourselves.
100%. And I think there's so many examples that I've learned here in Juneau where we spend 95% of our time dealing with crises that have been caused because of lack of investment upstream.
Yes.
If people got to stay in the homes that they were paying for, if they'd had a way to keep their job, to keep paying their rent, then they wouldn't end up homeless.
Right.
It's easier to keep people in their homes than to try to solve this crisis down here of figuring out sheltered transitional housing and all of the problems that get pushed upon these folks down here that make it more and more difficult for them to get out.
Exactly. We have at 3127 Commercial Drive a 14,000 square feet building that was donated to us by GCI. And they're one of our major partners and behind us on this. If we're going to have an internet cafe in there. Our president and CEO, Shenee Williams, came up with the idea for this community resource center because we do financial assistance. And we've learned from that there's a need for a one-stop service. We will be offering financial literacy. We will be offering mental health counseling. We have a child care drop-in. So if you come and you're trying to do these services, you can have a place for your kids. We have a furniture bank there. And this furniture bank will help us to provide furniture for those that are homeless. Because one of the things that our president shared with me was that the city had gotten someone a apartment. And she went there, and there was a tent in the middle of the living room. So that's not a home environment, right? So it's just, they need furniture. So we're opening up the first furniture bank.
Ed Wesley, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Delmonicia Shenee Williams is the president and CEO of Shiloh Community Housing Incorporated, an organization she has been with since its inception 24 years ago. Although her degree is in computer science, and she has had a career as a computer programmer and systems analyst, her true passion is public service, and she has helped bring the vision of Shiloh Community Housing to life. From its first affordable housing project,
through its transitional home for youth,
to today and its potential community resource center, Shenee Williams has been at the center of these important projects that have diminished homelessness here in Anchorage.
Delmonicia Williams, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You go by Shenee, correct?
That is correct.
I know that you are the president and CEO of Shiloh Community Housing.
That is correct.
I want to get to that, but where are you from?
I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama.
And what was your childhood like?
I came from a very loving family, but I grew up in low-income housing with a mom and a dad, but we struggled to make ends meet. My first job was in a housing office for the housing property that we lived in, what's called the projects in Alabama. I graduated and went on to college to receive a bachelor's degree in computer science, Alabama A&M.
Computer science. So it's interesting that you ended up in
social work.
Yes.
It is interesting. It's interesting. I have been a public servant at heart. I've always strived to discount the stereotypes of what I couldn't do or couldn't be. And I started doing, I guess you can call it public service really early in life. In my high school, I ended up being a cheerleader, and I was told I couldn't be a cheerleader because I came from the housing projects. I didn't have the money, but I became a cheerleader. And after being a cheerleader, I started out my sophomore year in high school. All the little girls in the community looked up to me because I was a cheerleader, and none of them had ever seen anyone from my neighborhood cheerleader. So that really raised their self-esteem that they knew someone that was a cheerleader. And at 16, I started my own cheerleader squad.
Oh, wow.
That was my first public project, public service project.
And did you recruit from your neighborhood?
Yes. Little girls beginning at age 5. And if they were in school, they had to show me their grades before they could be a cheerleader. They were so excited about that. And I did it for a couple of years until I graduated from high school. And there were others in the community that continued doing it. But I saw firsthand how building a person's self-esteem and making them believe in themselves was the first step. I believe self-esteem building is critical for everyone, and it builds hope. And it creates that attitude of, I can versus I can't.
How'd you get to Alaska?
Military. My husband was in the military. Moved to Fairbanks, Alaska in 1984. Moved to Anchorage in 1990. I joined Shiloh Community Housing in 2000. Right around
Okay,
2000.
so you've been with Shiloh for 24 years.
So I was instrumental in working with the founder of the organization, Pastor Emeritus, Reverend Dr. Alonzo Patterson. He's the founder of the organization. His initial vision was one organization, Shiloh Community Development. Mm-hmm. And Shiloh Community Development had a housing arm, a youth arm, seniors arm, health arm, education arm, justice arm. He had a really broad vision. So right around 2002, we incorporated our first nonprofit. But in building a nonprofit, we were trying to see what would be the priorities. And housing just raised to the top as being a priority. I worked with Pastor Patterson, and we started concentrating on housing. Housing just took over. And we became a CHODO, Community Housing Development Organization. That's a HUD certification. And HUD came back and said, you can't do anything but housing.
Okay.
And it was like, okay, this is what we're doing right now. Shiloh Community Development was renamed Shiloh Community Housing.
Gotcha.
I want to make it clear, development was renamed Shiloh Community Housing. About 6 months later, Pastor Meredith said, I still want to do those other things. Mm-hmm. So Shiloh Community Development was created. So now there are two.
Gotcha.
Shiloh Community Housing and Shiloh Community Development. Shiloh Community Housing, we created our first property, and it was CHODO was instrumental in building affordable housing. So we have a few affordable housing projects in the city of Anchorage, and we make the rents very affordable. And we don't look at credit. We don't look at backgrounds. If you have a crime, we'll still allow you to move into our apartment. We don't look at income levels. Mm-hmm. If you can show you can pay the rent, then we'll take you and we'll work with you in order to make the rent payments. We also have, that was started in 2003 through 2004. Mm-hmm. Right around 2007, we created a transitional housing program for young adults, single young adults, ages 18 to 24 that are experiencing homelessness. And this is for males and females. Mm-hmm. We purchased a property, a 12-plex, and these young adults actually live on our campus. They can live on our campus up to 2 years. The homes are completely furnished. We have guidelines posted as to the rules, very relaxed rules, no visitors, no drugs and alcohol. And the main thing that we look for coming into our program is we ask 2 questions. Are you willing to learn to live beyond your current circumstances? They have to at least be able to communicate that. The next question is, are you willing to work, to live, to learn to do that? And if that answer is yes, you can move into our program.
Do you guys help them find a job if they don't have one?
That's the first step. We have 2 dedicated resources that work with that population. I have a male that work with the young men, and I have a female that work with the young women. And our first order of business is for them to tell us, what is your goal in life? What is it that you would like to do? And the next question, you can stay in this program for up to 2 years. What do you hope to accomplish toward that goal in the 2 years? Our program coordinators, that's what we call them. They're not case managers. They're not mentors. They're more like coaches because we hold the participants accountable for the goal that you said you were going to achieve. And of course, just like everybody else, you have the right to change your mind. So we just want to know that you're making progress. We check in regularly on them for that. And we rely on the community. We're on the hook for life skills training, cooking, cleaning, roommate dynamics, life skills. Any other services that we need, we rely on the community referrals to other agencies.
So you said it's a 12-plex. Is it 12 people or 24?
No, so it's a 12-plex. 2 of the units are used for offices. Staff is there all day. 10 units are 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units.
Gotcha.
So the 1-bedroom units, we charge a program fee, not rent. And that fee is $400 based on their ability to pay. If you're living in a 2-bedroom unit, your fee is $350 per person.
Gotcha.
And that includes all utilities, and they have to provide their own meals, cooking, all of those things, groceries, but it's fully furnished and they're really nice. We're hoping that if we put them in a standard, that they're going to continue that standard of living that they become accustomed to. Laminate floors, really nice furniture, and like I said, we've been in operations since 2007.
My guess, though, is that there's probably more demand than you can fill.
You would think. Not necessarily. We do have vacancies, and we have more vacancies for young women than we have for young men.
Do y'all do half and half?
Yes. We have the building, we have a west wings of the buildings. It evens out to about half and half. At capacity, we can accommodate 14. So I think that ends up being 8 young men and 6 young women.
Gotcha.
But no drugs and alcohol. That is huge. That is a huge.
Have you had people kicked out for that?
Almost 98% of the people that leave our program early is because of that. And it's not necessarily, we don't drug test. This is drugs in their room.
You see it.
That we see. Not even suspect. We see it. So that's 98% of people that leave there. We've had some success. We have a couple of our young adults that are in college and they're staying in the program. We get participants from aging out of foster care, Military Youth Academy. We work real close with Covenant House, and then just people on the street. But the main goal is, are you willing to work to live beyond your current circumstances is the operative question.
Let's talk about the new plan, which is the Community Resource Center. Can you tell us about that and what the plan is?
Absolutely. And before I go there, I'm going to tell you how we came up with this whole idea.
Okay.
We have a program, financial assistance, and we provide eviction prevention. We prevent utilities from being shut off, first month's rent, and security deposits. And of course, we do this with partners in the city. United Way, Alaska Housing Finance, Catholic Social Services, and then donations. That application for those services is very evasive. And we kept hearing, and we've been operating that particular program since 2010. We kept hearing, I don't know how. I didn't know that. How do I do that? In order to get the financial assistance, we realized that there was a gap. Our whole mission is to keep people housed and prevent homelessness before it starts. So we came up with the idea, let's create a resource center that would fill that gap in education. Teaching people, having a place for them to come for financial management, financial literacy, money management. Because right now, where would you go? And this particular community resource center is for the entire community of all ages, not just 18 to 24. What we've learned through the process is that exactly what those 18 and 24-year-old needs in order to learn to live beyond their circumstances. It's the same thing that 30, 40, 50, 60, even 70-year-olds need today. And so the Resource Center is going to provide that level of education. Mm-hmm. We're going to be operating in a building that was donated to us by GCI. It is over 14,000 square feet. It's a 2-story building. So we're going to have an internet cafe. GCI not only gave us the building, they gave us free internet for the next 5 years. And we're hoping that's going to be the draw that brings people in. Mm-hmm. We know that there's a percentage of the community that needs help. We also understand the stigma around receiving help. Mm-hmm. And we also know that there are people all over the city of Anchorage that need that help. Mm-hmm. We know from our financial assistance program, the neighborhoods, the zip codes that we've helped. And they're not just in one location. Mm-hmm. They're over the entire city of Anchorage, including Girdwood and Eagle River. We know that. So this resource center is going to be located in Mountain View. We're hoping that the internet cafe will be the draw because people need an excuse to get help. So if you come and have a cup of coffee, we're going to have a soup sandwich, coffee in the internet cafe. You can go upstairs, which is going to have an area for behavioral health education and the money management I spoke of before, and office space for rent. It's going to be upstairs. Downstairs, along with the internet cafe, would be a job center and a child drop-in center. So while you're in the building receiving services, including using the internet for free, you can drop your child off. Just imagine a child care provider been able to use the internet for an hour and not have to worry about their child. I would have wanted that when I was a young mother with my kids. But we're going to also have a furniture bank.
I was going to ask about that.
Yes, it's in the adjacent warehouse where we're going to collect gently used furniture and give it away.
Mm-hmm. What's the status of the project right now?
I'm speaking to you from Juneau. And we're down here trying to get funding. We're estimating that the total project is about $2.5 million. To date, we've raised about $895,000. We're here meeting with legislators. We need about 1.6.
Gotcha.
Mil.
1.6 million left to go.
With that, the furniture bank is being remodeled right now. We hope to have the furniture bank online May.
Oh, okay.
People are waiting. So right now, we would like to start using the building, but we need an elevator.
Gotcha.
We need ADA accessibility. But we've had a legislator meet there with their constituents. We have had the city assembly members use the space. So the space is usable, but it's not at the standard we want to see it at before we open it out to the general public.
If folks want to make a donation or contribute in some way, how can they do that?
Our website, shilohhousing.org.
shilohhousing.org. shilohhousing.org.
Yes, and we are 501c3, so all of your contributions are tax deductible. And we have another area, this whole idea around homelessness prevention, we've taken it and addressed all the different areas we think will prevent homelessness. So if you go to our website, you'll see we have a project called a Home Starter Kit. So those individuals that are moving to homes that need to set up their kitchen, pots, pans, dishes, there's a project out there for that if you want to donate just to that, for that, because we see that as a need also. All of these things cost money. And once you pay first month's rent and security deposit, a lot of times you're out of money.
And I assume that by visiting the website, people can keep track of what stage you're at, what the current needs are, when the furniture bank might go online.
Definitely. I have vision boards out there that are really close to what the areas are going to look like when we are at completion. So the internet cafe, the job center, the money management, all of that, there's a vision board online that you can look at.
Shenee Williams, thanks so much for coming on the show today and for telling us about this project.
Thank you so much for having me. And I think it's going to be a project that we all can be proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Ed Wesley and Shenee Williams for being on the show today. You will find a link to Shiloh Community Housing in the show notes. And thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akleg.gov or call my office, 907-465-4940.